What's up, guys? Hope you've had a happy new year and things have been good on your end, that you've been getting some of those projects off those jack stands and rolling around. And if not, it's okay. I get that too. So, we just started carnival season here in New Orleans, and in order to enjoy my Mardi Gras with my friends like I want to then, I have some things I gotta get done here at the shop right now. And one of those includes some serious work on this 57 Chevy Bel Air that I have over here. So in this episode, you're going to be seeing me drop in the Ls3 4L80 combo. You're also going to see the mounting system I use, which are Speedway adapter brackets and a Speedway 4L80 crossmember. And in addition, I kind of wanted to give you guys a little bit of insight on what's going to go on with this build. So we have a new fuel system going in the way of a stainless fuel tank. We have a new Walbro 255 pump that's going in there. We have PTFE lines. The customer is trying to opt to run this Corvette filter regulator assembly. I don't think they're terrible necessarily, but a lot of people don't understand that the specs from the OEM to these aftermarket manufacturers aren't the same. So sometimes, just to keep it simple, you run into high fuel pressure issues and whatever comes along with that. So not only do we have that going on, we're also going to be putting on an aluminum radiator, routing the coolant system, and we're also going to be putting electric fans. And the whole thing is going to be powered by a PSI conversion harness specifically made for this LS3 4L80 combo. So I'm super stoked to be using all high quality components, and I think it's really going to be a pleasure to do this install. A pleasure for the customer to see how clean it comes out, and a pleasure for me as the builder, because I honestly hate having to do a lot of guesswork, and I hate having to turn turds into diamonds, if you know what I mean. So with that being said, guys, let's get into it. Alright, just to recap, you guys remember I pulled this 327 Power Glide combo out of the 57 Chevy, and here I have it all tied down to a pallet, ready for the owner to pick it up and bring it back to his garage to use in another project. Now, you'll see here, I have part number 16-55571, and these are the mounts that we're going to be using to get the engine in. They seem pretty heavy duty, so I'm really excited to see how these fit. I've never actually placed a set of these before, but we're going to get the motor cleaned up a little bit and get it off the stand. So my old helper John decided to stop by and see what I was up to, and I thought this was a perfect opportunity to get some free labor out of him. So I had him man the cherry picker while I get everything set up with the engine, that way we can get it off the stand. With the stand out of the way, I'm going to make sure I get it sat securely down, nice and gentle, so I don't damage the oil pan. That way, on the ground, we can bring the transmission and get it placed behind it. Now, if you look here, you'll see I have these ARP flex plate to converter bolts. The converter needs 6 bolts, so I'll have to pull another pack off the shelf. But I also have the bell housing to block bolts that we're going to end up using. And I ended up using a flat style flex plate with a round spacer that attaches to the crank. Now you're going to need 6 bolts to get this attached, and just make sure when you're attaching everything, you don't want to use your bolts of your bell housing to draw the transmission to the engine. If you do that, something's wrong. Reassess and take your time and get everything placed correctly. And I'm just showing you here that there's 6 bolts that go into this converter. So don't miss, but take your time, and you want to put at least a quart of fluid inside of your converter. Some people put more. Just make sure you have at least a quart in there. You don't want to remember that you didn't put any fluid in there when you have the engine and transmission mated already and prepared to go in the car. So here you'll see me installing the converter into the 4L80. Now, how do you know you have it sat all the way back? Well, most transmissions from General Motors have about 3 detents or clicks that you feel when you're sliding the converter back in there. And you want to make sure it's seated properly in there. That way you avoid any damage to the seal, the front pump, or any sort of leaks that could potentially happen. Once you verified it's in there, now it's time to mate things up. So the easiest way to do this is to get the engine on the ground and get the transmission close to it and line up the dowels. Easier said than done, but if you take your time, and with 2 people, it's a lot easier, you can get the bolts started and installed. So here you'll see John. He just got the bell housing bolted up,
and now he's installing the converter to flex plate bolts. You need somebody to spin the motor over for him, as well as hold the motor still with the front nut on the crank while he tightens down. Okay, so if you look to your left, you'll see one of the old horseshoe mounts that I have to knock out. It has the bushings and the metal washer stacked. But for right now, I'm going to use my smallest grinder, which is my Harbor Freight grinder, and I'm going to try to get the heads off these rivets as best I can, at least enough to go at them with the cold chisel. Now, the cold chisel will usually take the heads off, but sometimes, as I found out, they aren't as easy as you think, so you might have to end up pulling the grinder back out and taking the heads off a little bit more. But after doing a little bit of work and making sure I got them off in an even fashion, I was actually able to hit them a few good times with the punch, and they went into the frame and disappeared for me. Now the next thing I'm going to do is get the mounts out the box and get those placed on the frame so we can get the engine in. As you'll see on the driver's side, I cut X's in thinking it would be easier to get the heads off. They weren't, guys. Just go ahead and grind them off, take your time, and then knock them through with the punch. You won't save any time cutting any X's. So here you'll see I have rivserts. Initially, the plan is from Speedway that you put hardware in on the other side of the frame rail, but I'm just going to put in these rivserts to get everything in place, and I'm going to end up welding the plates onto the inside of the frame rail. But if you don't have a welder, don't fret. You can put nuts on the back of the plates and washers. You just have to take out the front suspension to do so. But I'm really happy to have this kind of placed now, because originally I wasn't exactly sure how it all fit, but now after getting in that driver's side, I'm pretty sure the passenger side's going to look just great when it sits in there as well. Okay, so I got the driver's side mount in, and I got the passenger side mount in. The hardest part, guys, of this whole thing was getting those stupid heads off those rivets. Those things are really, really hardy. I'm kind of worried about the space. The space kind of looks tight. I am seeing here where I'm going to wish that I took those accessories off, but I'm going to try to see what fits. I don't know anything. There's not really any good detail online about installing these things, so I wasn't really able to see how much space there's going to be. But I guess let's just try to give it a stab. Okay, so we have the engine and transmission combo ready to go. I have the compressor on here, I have the alternator on here. Again, I'm just trying to see what's actually going to fit, and if they fit, I mean, of course, joyous day. I'm not having a good feeling about them fitting, but I'm going to give it a stab with them on there in the first place, just to see what we can do. Alright, so let's try to get this thing stabbed. Now, let's save a bunch of time here, guys. I'm just going to let you in. You want to get the front of the car up as high as you can. And the reason that is for two things. You need to have a steep enough angle on the chain so your engine is damn near slanted. Okay? And once you have it like that, you'll finally be able to get the bell housing to slide far enough back into the engine bay. And if you don't do that, it's going to basically seem like the mounts won't fit. They're just going to sit in front of the lower mounts, and you're going to be really frustrated. And again, as with most things, this is easier with two people doing it, especially a guy down at the bottom moving the transmission around for you. So you see how much of an angle I have here. This actually was pretty important, and it looks kind of crazy from here because I have that battery tray and the accessory still on there. But look down here, you'll see that there's not a lot of space back there, and it had me kind of worried. And you'll see my mount is nowhere near seated where it should be seated. It's in front of the lower mount. Now at this point, I'm kind of scratching my head, but after jacking up on the car more, I was able to see that I can get the back end of the transmission further down and get the mounts to actually kind of come over, as you'll see in a sec. So victory. I got one mount in on the driver's side. I see that I may have been able to fit my alternator on here, but I'm glad I took it off anyway, especially having all this trouble getting it to fit onto the engine mounts. It just made it easier to move everything around. Now you'll see here, this is almost lined up. And I did it, you guys. Joyous day. So I did it again. get you a second person to help you guys. Don't fight it like I did. Now I guess we're going to get on to the transmission. So this is the crossmember kit from Speedway. I painted it with some chassis black from the auto parts store. It's a pretty solid unit, and it just slides and sits on top of the frame rails. It also comes with this poly bushing, or mount if you will. It's pretty solid, made in the USA, and it also comes with all its hardware. In addition to that, you have these two spacer plates you see down to the left. Those are just to take up any slack between the crossmember and the frame rail. And here I'm just measuring to see if everything's going to line up. It seems pretty good, but I did have to use my unibit to widen out the holes a little bit because they were just a smidge off. But other than that, it worked out perfectly. Okay, so we're underneath the car. As you see, I have the crossmember in place. The transmission is floating on a board, and I'm just doing this to be able to have space to get in my crossmember mount. But basically, you want to mark your holes for the crossmember before you drill anything. You can use rivserts, and any gaps you see, those are usually taken up by those little spacers that you saw previously that came in the kit. But it's pretty straightforward to get it in there, you guys. The mount to the transmission, those holes are perfect, so I'm going to go ahead and get those snugged up. Now I have to go find the washer because one was missing from the hardware pack, but I have everything in place. I did have to use my unibit to widen out the holes a bit, but it worked out just fine. Finally, the 57 Chevrolet has a power plant. The Ls3 and the 4L80 are seated. The mounts are on there. I could take my time now and go ahead and finish welding them in. So I guess with that being said, I'll see you guys in the next one.